All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Wow. The Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. We're keeping all this in. We're doing this thing live, not in the name redacted way, where he's just shouting at people and throwing papers in that all-time great YouTube video. But joining me at this time, Fangraphs Jon Jon Tayler up there in New York City.
New York City.
John, how are you?
I am doing well. I'm amazed that it has taken this long for you to flub the intro, given how many words and how fast it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So congrats on that. Congrats on making that stretch out as long as it has. That errorless streak. You are the whoever has a long errorless streak currently in baseball of podcast intros.
Who had the longest?
I haven't. It's one of those things. Like I find that defensively, at least stuff like that, I pay almost no attention to at this point. It just doesn't register anymore. So I would not be able to tell you who that is. When I was trying to cue that joke up in my head, I was like, no, I really don't. I guess Ozzie Smith. I don't know. Did he have a long errorless streak?
Scott Brocious.
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
Marcus Giles.
You're just naming guys now.
It's got to be someone random. The reason I'm going random is that, like, I look at the person with the longest no air streak, kind of like the kid in class who, like, took pride in coming to school, like perfect attendance. Like, my family and I, we never signed on for the perfect attendance people, because if you went to school every single day for a full calendar year, that means you went to school sick at least one point during that year, and you got other people sick. It is a ridiculous award, Jon Tayler.
It's pointless,
right? But it's also pointless. Encouraging people to go to work sick, go to school.
Yeah,
sick.
Then that's the thing. It's self-defeating too. Like, don't do that. Don't go to work sick. Don't go to school sick. Take your allotted sick days. Those are your legal right, especially as a worker. Like, do not do that. Do not get other people sick just because of some mistaken belief in, like, rise and grind hustle mentality that demands that you put your precious white blood cells to the test. Just don't do that.
No. But that's what I always looked at it. And I think that's the air, because, like, if you commit an error, look, man, sometimes you're freestyling over here. Sometimes you're just like, if you're a really good fielder and you're just like, I'm going to try something. Like, the best, coolest fielders are the ones who have a crazy air where they're like, hey, I wanted to do a somersault into a double play and it didn't work out. I wanted to dive at something that I thought I could get and I couldn't get, but I'd rather try it. Like, instead of, like, avoiding the air, because you know what I mean? Like, that's what you want. You want someone who at least tries and has a couple errors, because that shows that they have experimented a little bit. They tried to do something that they could not do, but they tried, and hey, that's cool.
Tried.
So you learn.
They made an effort.
They made an effort.
Exactly.
Jon Tayler. Do you know who else made an effort over the past month and a half?
Well, someone made an effort, I guess.
The Houston Astros made an effort, John.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, because this is our first post-World Series.
This is our first post-World Series.
Yes. The World Series.
John, the Astros win the World Series. The Phillies looked like they were gaining some momentum early when they were back in Philadelphia. Houston slams the door on all of that. And, you get a combined no-hitter. That was really cool. It's never a good sign if you're the opposing team from a combined no-hitter. It's like that the series is not going well in this way. But in your best estimation, or best summation, rather, how did the Astros win the World Series, John?
By having a better pitching staff, ultimately. I mean, those last 3 games of the series, Houston gave up, a combined total of 3 runs in 3 games. Most of that Phillies lineup simply stopped hitting. As you mentioned, the combined no-hitter already. It's all very, when you look at it that way and you look at the work particularly done by Christian Javier as part of that combined no-hitter, Justin Verlander's not exactly better, but to a certain degree better second start. And then Framber Valdez, his 2 starts, both of them are excellent, including the clincher. Yeah, I mean, it just boils down to the pitching, and that goes without even mentioning the bullpen as well. That was more or less flawless for the entirety of the series. Aside from, I think, a run or 2 somewhere in there. I feel like I've already forgotten the details of this World Series, but pitching. It was pitching, because truthfully, Houston, and this is kind of the funny thing for Houston throughout the playoffs, they never really hit well in any particular series. They hit plenty of home runs, and as we talked about a bit last time, that is the guaranteed way to score in the postseason. It's really hard to string hits together against good pitching staffs, but their offense produced basically what it needed to, and the pitching made it all stand up. And that just ended up being the biggest difference. I think, too, obviously, as we saw bits throughout the series, Houston defensively just a better team. So really, if you want to just chalk it up to overall run prevention, I think you could do that. That Houston is a very strong defensive team. They made some great defensive plays. Obviously, Chas McCormick robbing JT Muto of extra bases in the ninth inning of game 5, which could have been a huge turning point had Real Muto reached with Bryce Harper up behind him. That was obviously a very, very big play. Similarly, in that game, 2 plays that stand out, both at first base. One was Rhys Hoskins botching a pretty not a routine, but a play that should have been made at first base on a ground ball hit to him with runners on the corners that he couldn't come up with cleanly, and they couldn't get the run at home, or the runner at home. And what was a 2-0 game became a 3-0 game. That run ended up looming kind of large in that one. Similarly, in that same game, when Yuli Gurriel had to come out with I think what ended up being an ankle sprain, Trey Mancini replaced him at first base and made a very nice pick on a scorched line drive hit right at him late in the late innings to help keep Philadelphia off the board. Those kinds of things just add up. And for as much as Philly being a bad defensive team didn't really kill them in this World Series, I mean, you saw Nick Castellanos make a lot of plays that Nick Castellanos normally does not make. But I think Houston was just overall the better run prevention team, better pitching, better defense, and they got just enough offense to make it all count, thanks in large part to Jeremy Pena, the World Series MVP, who was just fantastic at the top of the order, helped mitigate the struggles of Jose Altuve, who never really looked right at any point in the postseason, helped mitigate the World Series slump that Yordan Alvarez was in up until his Game 6 home run that went approximately 700 feet. Helped mitigate some of the struggles of guys like Kyle Tucker or the bottom of the lineup where they were kind of on and off. I think aside from Pena, Alex Bregman was really the only guy I feel like who was a regular presence on base. And even that was more just through walks and extra base hits, and it wasn't anything else. So that to me is a story of that series. It's just how simply good Houston is, how good their pitching is, how good their defense is, how deep they are overall as a team. And I think that was the drum I've been banging on since the start of the postseason. They were the deepest team in the postseason, aside from maybe the Dodgers. Once the Dodgers fell out, it felt to me like it was Houston's postseason to win essentially, and they ended up doing that. And kudos to the Phillies who made it as far as they did. Kind of very much a surprising month, I think. I think there are a lot of pieces there set up well for the future in Philadelphia, and I assume that Dave Dombrowski will be busy this offseason to try to build off of this particular run of success, but in the end, they just ran into a better team overall. And I think that's just for as much as we spent the early part of the postseason talking about all the good teams are getting knocked out and all these upsets are happening. It's like, no, man, in the end of the day, the best team won, and not just one, but I think won convincingly. I don't really think there's any question that Houston is was the deserving champion for this season.
And I think that's good where you need the variety. I kind of like that because I think last year, look, banners are forever. Check it in the back behind me. 2022 or 2021 rather, for the Braves. They were not the best team in baseball last year. Got hot at the right time. Like Jorge Soler does not do what he did 9 times out of 10 in that postseason run. And sometimes it just works out that way. The Braves were a better team this year. They didn't win the World Series. The Dodgers were a great baseball team, but you look at the Astros and they were the most dominant from the beginning to the end of the postseason. And it was different. It was just the best team won. And I like that there's a little bit of variety still in Major League Baseball postseasons, even with the expansion, even with more and more teams getting in. Look, there was a big fear going into this year where a lot of the talking points going into this was like, oh, what does this mean? Like the Phillies, if they had won, the fallout is, okay, look at this. This is an indictment on playoff expansion. The Phillies were bad all year.
I mean, you could read it that way. I think the other way is that like any team can win if they get hot at the right time, ideally.
But the Astros were hot all year long. Like the Astros were literally hot from the beginning of this season to the end of this season. The Astros were hot.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. Like I don't think there's any debate that Houston was a better team overall. Just top to bottom. They proved it over the course of the regular season. They proved it over the course of the postseason. I just don't find myself necessarily in agreement with folks who I think Joe Sheehan has been one of the more vocal people about this, to be like, oh, the Phillies shouldn't have even been here in the first place. It's such a bad sign when I forget who was saying that the NLCS was between a team that finished in a third place, 11 games out of first, and a team that finished 22 games out of first in their division. It's like, yeah, but that happens. That you're not always going to get the two best teams in each league meeting in
Next
the
year
end of
might
their
be the number one and
championship
number
series.
two.
It might be, and the other thing is like how many. Part of the thinking I had coming into this postseason was like, boy, it's going to be really boring if we get Astros, Yankees, and Braves, Dodgers essentially again.
Yeah.
And we have to do that whole song and dance again. Like, I mean, I don't have any issue with Houston winning a World Series with regards to let's get some new blood in there. We've had between Houston's last title and their most current title, we had 4 different teams win the World Series. We had the Red Sox win in 18. We had the Nationals win in 19. We had the Dodgers finally winning in 20, and then the Braves in 21. So we had a team winning a World Series for the first time, a team winning its first World Series in a while after being really dominant, Braves team winning for the first time in 30 years, and the Red Sox. But you're still getting that variety, even if you're not getting all the I guess ultimately the question is, what do you want more? Do you want the postseason to be something where the number one team in each league is dutifully rewarded with a championship? Or do you want to see variety, and do you want to see teams making runs? Because as it is, like the way the postseason is set up, again, you're not going to get guaranteed the number 1 and number 2 teams in each championship series to then play for the World Series. That's just not going to happen with the way things are currently set up. You are more likely than not going to get years like this one and last year and the year before. Well, maybe not so much the year before that, because the Rays were, I think, pretty close to the best team in the AL that year if they weren't. Outright, or a year like, you're going to get the Nationals, you're going to get the second half Braves, you're going to get the Phillies from the month of October. It's just going to happen in the way this is set up. And you can complain about that setup, but at the same time, like we talked about, the only alternative is basically to go back to the way things were way back in baseball's heyday, where there were no divisions and it was just the top team from each league automatically won the pennant and went to the World Series. If that's what you want, I don't, no judgment on that, but you're not going to get it. Like, this is the system we have. And I don't think there was anything that happened in this postseason that would make MLB think even for a second about going back to the old format or changing up to a different format. As far as I can tell, MLB got their money from ESPN for that extra round of the playoffs. I'm sure the postseason was very valuable for them, as it always is. It ended with the best team overall winning anyway, but we also got some good runs from unexpected teams. We got that Phillies team that was just really fun to watch. I can't imagine there's anyone in MLB who looks at this postseason and goes, that didn't work. It worked exactly like they wanted it to. And I just don't see any way in which next year's postseason and the postseason after that and the postseason after that isn't just going to be more of the same. Because in MLB's mind, the expanded postseason did exactly what it was supposed to do. It gave more teams the opportunity to be part of the postseason. It gave more fan bases opportunities to be invested in their team, and it paid off because you had one team going from essentially the lowest seed in the National League to within 2 wins of the World Series at one point. That's honestly kind of the dream for baseball. I don't think Rob Manfred and company care whether or not the best team in baseball wins the World Series every year. It's nice, I guess, if it happens, but I don't think it's something that either invalidates the course of the season as it happened, or that causes any real problems at Major League Baseball headquarters. They want variety, they want diversity, and I think ultimately they probably want wildcard teams to make that run, because I assume in part, part of the ostensible reason for the expanded playoffs is so that more teams have a chance to win titles. In reality, it's so that more teams have a chance to get to the playoffs without having to exert that much financial effort. But the nice side effect of that, I guess, can be, yeah, but if you're a team, like now you can look at teams going forward teams who would normally be in that kind of 80-ish win range. And again, you can point them to last year's Braves and this year's Phillies and be like, look what happens if you get hot at the right time. Look what happens if you make moves to stay in contention, if you build a team that is designed to win, as opposed to just punting winning off until the who knows when in the future. You're going to get a team that actually can win a championship, or at the very least can contend for one. It's much, much harder to build what Houston has done. That takes a whole assload of time. And and kudos especially to the Houston. It's a top to bottom phenomenal organization, I guess aside from ownership, that is good at literally everything a baseball franchise and team can be good at. But if this year had ended with the Phillies winning the World Series instead of the Astros, I don't think that necessarily changes anything about the sport itself or how it functions. I think you would have had a lot of complaining from people that an 80-something win team won the World Series, but we've had that before. The '06 Cardinals were an 80-something win team. The 2021 Braves, how many wins did that Braves team finish with ultimately? 89, 90, 91,
It
88,
wasn't
something
90.
around
I think
there?
it was the 80s. It was in the
Yeah,
80s.
like we have had this, and the baseball world just kept on spinning. And like, there's if you're a purist, you probably don't like it, but at the same time, if you're a purist, the game does this. The sport doesn't really care about you at this point. Rob Manfred has made it abundantly clear that he is not a baseball purist in that regard. He wants the sport to be something different, something more. I'm not even really sure how exactly you would term it, but he does not he does not need baseball to be unchanged from the way it was. Nor do I see him being the kind of guy who's like, no, I want to go back to baseball classic essentially.
Yeah.
And it does that demean the regular season to a certain degree? Sure, I guess. Like it does stink, I think, for teams that win their divisions and win 100 games in the process to go out in the first round of the playoffs because they lost a best of 3 series. Essentially, that can't be fun. But that's just the nature of a postseason. That's the
That's
nature of a
baseball.
short tournament.
What we should want is just different variety where like sometimes the best went out and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a mixture. Sometimes it's a weird situation where it's Padres Phillies and then the next year it's Dodgers Braves. Like I think the main thing is you don't want uniformity year over year. You
No,
don't want
you don't want a system where you're seeing the same 4 teams in the CS every year.
right.
And that's what I was kind of worried about going to this postseason was that, oh, the teams at the top of each league respectively are very, very strong. And there's a good chance that our CS is just a repeat of last year's with the Yankees taking the place of. Wait, actually, I've already forgotten who was in the 2021 ALCS with Houston. Was it the
Off the top of my
Yankees?
head,
Oh, no, it was Boston. Never mind. That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, so with the Yankees replacing the Red Sox in that formula, but
Mhm.
I agree with you. Diversity is good, variety is good. I think
Which is good all across the board, I would say.
and the funny thing is you're still getting that diversity and variety, along with the fact that Houston has pretty well built what you could pretty easily call a dynasty. 2 titles, 4 pennants, I believe 5 division titles in the span of from 2017 onward. Like, you know, that is a borderline dynasty, if not a dynasty. I don't want to the semantics debate of what a dynasty is doesn't really matter to me, but they are a very, very good baseball team, and that can still exist even with all the variety we're getting in terms of the teams that are in the postseason. You can have both. It's good to have both. I think it's good to have the diversity of teams in there, and I think it's good too to have a really good team like that can win titles. I think that's just good for the sport. If I think you need that every now and then, if not often, the best team should win. That just works and makes sense. But I don't think it has to happen all the time. Nor do I think that if it doesn't happen, that's a sign that there's something wrong with the sport.
Can the Astros run it back, John?
Sure, I don't see why not. I mean, for the most part, they are bringing the entire or the majority of that team back. I mean, their major free agent is Justin Verlander, who I have to assume if he does want to continue playing, he probably will remain in Houston unless there's some burning desire to go somewhere else. I think if Detroit had been in better shape, maybe there's some conversation about like, oh, does he want to go back to Detroit and try to take them over the top finally? But I can't really see that with the way things have played out there so far. I mean, otherwise, their major free agents are Martin Maldonado, who is probably going to retire if he doesn't come back. Trey Mancini, who never really emerged into any kind of starting position there. More minor guys like Ryan Stanek and Phil Maton. The rest of that team is coming back. With the possible exception, I would guess, of depending whether or not Houston exercises its team option on Hector Neris. But otherwise, the whole band is reuniting. So no, I don't see any reason why they can't run it back. It's just going to be a matter of, can they get lucky in terms of, or how can they do in terms of, what holes do they need to fill this offseason, and how much stronger is Seattle and possibly Texas going to be behind them? But no, I don't see any reason why the Astros can't bring it back. Although interestingly, funny enough, right now I'm actually looking at their contract situation. I'm not seeing Yuli Gurriel's name here anywhere, which is kind of strange. I'm wondering if his contract may be up. Although actually, now that I mentioned, no, there he is. I was going to say I can't even find him on Houston's baseball reference page. Yeah, Yuli Gurriel is also a free agent, but again, a guy who at age
Nearing
30,
40.
Yeah, he's going to be 39 in June. Like, he had a very down season offensively. He was pretty good throughout the postseason. I think there's still something there, but I also would not be surprised if Houston moves on from Gurriel anyway. But all of which is to say their most major free agent is Verlander. I'm pretty confident in saying that if they want him back, he will come back. They're not gonna have to empty the Brinks truck or anything to bring him back. So yeah, I'd say if you were to, just purely right now, like early 2023 power rankings, I'd say you'd probably put Houston and the Dodgers 1-2 in some order in terms of the most likely World Series teams in that group. Atlanta is probably in there as well. The Yankees, depending on what they do. Maybe the Mets, very much depending on what they do. But yeah, I'd say Houston has a very good chance of winning it all again.
Notice you left out the Phillies there.
I mean, I think, and I think there's a bigger conversation to be had about like what do the Phillies do for next year to kind of make this stick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily know if there is one thing in particular. I think a similar situation where the team is as a whole returning. You look at who they have under contract for 2023. It's pretty much everybody. Although actually I just realized Baseball Reference has already pushed over to 2023 contracts and just left 2022 off the books. But I think the thing with Philly is just a matter of can they add enough depth, particularly pitching wise, to put themselves in better position to win the division? Because I would feel a lot more comfortable saying the Phillies will win can be realistic World Series contenders again if they can actually win the NL East. Because for as much as they almost did it as the number 6 seed through the wild card, that is obviously a much, much more difficult path. And I don't think it's one that the Phillies are going to be eager to try again. Your best bet of winning the World Series is to win your division and just start from there. So, with that caveat, if the Phillies can improve in the offseason and similarly to Houston, fill whatever holes they need to fill on their roster, which mostly to me, again, is starting pitching depth, reliever help, ideally improving the defense to some degree. I know that you're going to have, you're still going to have that middle of the order of Harper, Realmuto, and Castellanos and Schwarber, but ideally some better gloves in there somewhere to try to improve the run prevention of this team. Otherwise though, I think Philly's in a good spot. I just don't know that I'd put them near the top of that. I think probably better said, it's much easier to predict that Houston and the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Braves and the Mets will have better World Series odds, I think, than a team like the Phillies will.
I like it. I think it's just going to be hard for them to get back, and I think the NL East is going to be even better and be even
and a lot of that too, just like it depends on what the Marlins do. If the Marlins make themselves better and actually can,
and we're operating on the assumption that they are going to do that. I think because
at the very least, I think
is
they're going to make changes.
Winner, they're in a organizational shift if they don't win. I mean, you make the manager change to Skip Schumacher, and we'll see what he looks like. Never seen him before, first time manager, but by and large, I mean, I'm still predicting the Marlins have the biggest move to make this winter because they just have so much firepower with their starting pitching that so many folks around the league would kill for. So
yeah, and I think we're already seeing rumors that Pablo Lopez is being talked about. Someone who almost moved at the deadline, someone we've talked about as someone who it would make a lot of sense. I think if Miami is going to move one starter, that it would be Lopez to get a bat back. Just to circle back to the Phillies real fast, I finally did pull up their free agent list. Noah Syndergaard, Gene Segura, Corey Knebel, Kyle Gibson, Brad Hand, Zach Eflin, David Robertson. These are not, if all of those guys walk, will the Phillies be worse? Maybe by a little, but those are not guys where if they lose them all, it's doom and gloom time in Philadelphia. I think the core of that team, much like Houston, is still in place. And with some smart moves around the edges, they will be just fine. Similarly with Houston, Verlander's the only major free agent, depending on how you feel about Michael Brantley, who is already 35 and will be 36 next season. Similarly with Gurriel and Mancini and your boy Will Smith. Not a lot of notable free agents. I think honestly,
back-to-back world champ Will Smith.
Behind Verlander, you can make an argument that the most valuable free agent the Astros will have to figure something out with is Rafael Montero, who is very, very good for them in relief. Has been very good in relief since he joined up with Seattle and since the Mariners moved him to Houston. A guy I can see them probably bringing back, although as you've seen with Houston, their pitching development is just so strong that I don't even know. I think they can let a guy like that walk and they'll survive it. But yeah, neither of those two teams I think has anything to worry about in terms of the overall core. I think it's just a matter of deepening the roster for both of them and adding wherever they need to add to get themselves stronger.
I like it, John. But something I don't like that friend of the pod, Bob Silverman, at Rabid Mets fan, I tweeted him the contract because you alerted me to the contract first, and then I was
Hmm.
like, oh no, oh Mets,
Oh
and
no.
then I text Bobby to get his real time reaction. He's like, "Don't care, not my money," and that's what
As
I
it should
think.
be.
Right, and I think that's a fair assessment. If you're a Mets fan and you're concerned, like I think that's fair to be like, it's not our money. We have the richest center in baseball. Go do it, man. Like
Yeah.
just flex and spend all the money because it's not ours and it helps the team.
That's the
That is,
thing.
yeah,
Is it peak financial efficiency to give your closer $100 million contract?
no,
No, I don't think there's anyone who could argue that with a straight face. Does that matter? Here, also no.
yeah,
Because I think the way to look at the Diaz deal, which is huge and I think is good for both sides. Obviously, it's good for Diaz to get that deal, to get the no trade clause, to get the early opt out if he wants to try the market again, to get the 6 year option. All of that is great for him. Good job for him and by him and his agent. For the Mets, is there a better way to use that money? Probably not, because as we talked about last week, the Mets bullpen is really one of their weaknesses going into 2023. Diaz was far and away the best reliever in that bullpen and was set to hit free agency. The next best reliever in that bullpen was Adam Ottavino, who is going to be a free agent. I believe the next best reliever behind him is Trevor May, who I believe is also a free agent. Their only left-handed reliever in that bullpen, Joely Rodriguez, I believe, is also a free agent. Like, there was not a whole lot. Seth Lugo, also a free agent. There was not a whole lot of carryover from now last season to this coming season. And what carryover there was, I mean, your top returning reliever was set to be Drew Smith. And
hmm
Drew Smith is fine, but that's not, you got to do better than that if you're the Mets. So, and if you also look at the fact that, Diaz was far and away the best reliever available in the open, who was going to be available in the open market. There was really no one who was going to come close to him in terms of ability and also in terms of exactly what the Mets need, which is a ninth inning guy, which is a closer, someone they can deploy in their high leverage situations. And given where the Mets are on the contention cycle, which is to say very much contenders, that's not really a position they could say, oh, what does it matter? It kind of does matter for them. They need a guy who can lock down ninth inning leads on a reliable, regular basis. And it helps too that he was, by every measure, the best reliever in baseball last year. If you're the Mets and you have genuine designs on contending next year, you basically can't let your best reliever walk.
mm,
You know, it cost more than Steve Cohen probably wanted to pay? I'm sure. I'm sure the Mets would have preferred half that deal if they could have, but they were never going to get that. Diaz was always going to get this money from somebody. It makes the most sense for the Mets to keep him. I mean, again, look at that Mets bullpen as it currently stands right now and subtract Diaz from it, and that is a bottom 5 bullpen in baseball. If you're the Mets, you cannot run that out during the regular season. And yeah, process-wise, would it have made more sense or would it have been a better use of money or a more efficient use of money to give like 3 years and $36 million to Zach Eflin or something and then sign a bunch of cheaper guys around him? Sure. Is that bullpen going to be as good? Absolutely not. No.
yeah,
So I think the Mets they had to do what they did. And the other part of it is, like you said, Steve Cohen's the richest owner in baseball. This should not stop them when it comes to making their other moves. This should not stop them, if they want to, from re-signing Brandon Nimmo or from
hmm
re-signing Jacob deGrom or from adding whoever, from signing Wilson Contreras, if that's what they want to do, or whatever it is the Mets plans currently are for this offseason. Edwin Diaz's contract should not be an impediment at any point, really. Again, it's a move you had to make. It's a move you can afford. As your good buddy Bob said, it's not your money anyway. If you're a Mets
yeah.
fan, why are you don't it's not a thing you really should be worrying about. Your team can afford it, a la the Yankees way back in the day. Take advantage of that. Flex your money. Flex the strength you have there. Take advantage of that every time.
I want a in video reaction from David Stearns, right? Like to after moving Josh Hader when he did with the
Yeah.
Brewers, and it's like he's getting ready to move in, and like just he reads or some his executive assistant comes in and it's just like, hey, did you see the news? What, that job you wanted? Did you see who's on the payroll now for the next 5 years? That extension? It's like Edwin Diaz, 5 years. You're like, oh, that's gonna be a little bit more difficult to trade than Josh Hader in
Well,
a
I mean,
couple of years.
the joke I liked was that it must be they're definitely like flaunting, or they're definitely like flexing in front of David Stearns to be like, hey, look, we can keep our expensive closer.
Yeah,
We don't have to trade him mid-season just because we can't pay him anymore next year. And yeah, but that's kind of the other part of it is like that financial advantage is also beneficial in that way because again, it's if you can do things other teams can't, do
yeah.
them. take advantage
And
of
I think
that.
we all agree, right? Like all smart baseball people can, and I think you and I can agree on this. Like the contract's going to be pretty terrible at the end. Like I don't see
Yeah,
a
and that's but
5 year. Like
that's every
who cares?
contract.
If you
Yeah,
win a World
you're
Series, who cares?
the last 2 years of that Diaz contract probably will not be very fun.
No.
But the first 3 years are what you're going to need if you are serious about winning the NL East, about winning a World Series, about
Yep.
actually making postseason noise. You have to do it. There's no real way around that. Payroll flexibility, financial efficiency is wonderful, but it does not win championships. That's for sure.
Also, closers are cool. Wrote about it a few weeks ago. Closers
Yeah.
are cool. And
I also think, imagine how bad a start to the offseason it would be if you basically just said, yeah, Edwin Diaz is gone. We made him an offer and he didn't want it. So good luck to him. Talk about starting the offseason on the most sour note you possibly can. The closer everyone loved last year, who was the most dominant reliever in baseball, yeah, he's gone. But we got Drew Smith. Like, no Mets fan is going to want to stick around for that kind of thing.
no.
I mean, most Mets fans don't seem to want to stick around anyway. They're just cursed to. But
I think this is a start. Like you're already seeing they're talking with Jacob DeGrom. I think DeGrom's probably back. I think the Mets are going to be bold. I think we're going to see
I
this is
think they
the
have to
start
be.
of their spending a bunch of money this winter. I don't think the Mets are going in a corner.
Yeah, I think they have to be. I think we've talked about it before. Like to keep this team in contending status and bring back the pieces that work, you're going to have to spend a lot of money. There's just no way around that one. So, yeah, I agree that I think this will be a big offseason for the Mets because I don't think they have any other choice if they want to keep pace with everybody else at the top of the game.
The Angels going the opposite way. They have said
they are.
publicly that they are not going to trade Shohei Ohtani this offseason, John. This is a different one than Mike Trout. Mike Trout's dead to me. He signed the long-term contract. Don't feel bad for Mike Trout for sticking around in LA and not playing a meaningful baseball game in his entire Major League Baseball career. But that's on Trout at this point. Great player. It's a shame that everyone on the East Coast will never see it come this time of year. Shohei Ohtani's different. Shohei Ohtani, the writing's on the wall. Like this is, I think Shohei Ohtani's getting ready for the parachute to be ejected here. And I would, if I'm the Angels, man, I kind of want to get out in front of this. Like maybe because we'll have to see what happens with ownership, and I know that might be up for sale sooner rather than later. But what are we doing? This team's not winning the AL West next year. No matter what you do this offseason, I don't see a path to winning the AL West or even really just being a playoff team with the Mariners figuring it out and the Rangers really going for it too. I don't see it for the Angels. I don't know. Like, what would you do based on what we've seen and just the current landscape of the American League at this point? Would you just sell as high as you possibly can in Shohei Ohtani, or would you just be like, we're LA, we're a major market, we have Trout, we have Ohtani, we'll figure it out? What would you do, John?
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to say figure it out, if only just because, I think you hit one of the reasons why there won't be an Ohtani trade this offseason, and it's because there's no ownership, I think, yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is a situation where whoever the new owner of the Angels is going to be like, oh, hey, that super generational talent, the guy who's literally doing stuff that only Babe Ruth did before, arguably the most marketable player in the entire sport, the one of two reasons why people come to these games. Yeah, let's get rid of him. I don't see that happening. I think it's different from Soto because it just feels different from Soto to me. I think with that Nationals team, there was way less of a hope or an expectation that they would be good with or without Soto. So I could kind of understand the rationale there. Well, we might as well sell him because this team's going to be most intriguing to a potential buyer with as few with as few financial essentially obligations as possible. I don't really see the same for Ohtani, if only because, like you said, Trout's already there. You've already got Trout. And for as much as I agree that the Angels are not, I think, going to be contenders next year, barring some incredible change of everything, I think it behooves them at the very least to act as if they are, to try to make it work, give it a half season to see if they can make it work. And if by the trade deadline, we're once again looking at a lost Angel season, I think at that point and by that point also there's new ownership. I think we're going to be looking at possibly Ohtani being dealt then, and if not then, probably the following offseason. Because in my mind, I think you get one more year to try to figure this out, or at the very least to try to put together a team that is better overall. Are the Angels going to be able to do it? I kind of doubt it. I have not, we've not seen that. But on the other hand, maybe new ownership will be better in this regard. And I have to imagine that whoever new ownership is going to want Ohtani in the fold, at least for long enough to try to figure out whether or not any of this is doable. So yeah, I guess I would keep him for now. I don't think his value will be necessarily negatively impacted if he doesn't get moved this offseason as opposed to next. Obviously, it's 1 year less of Ohtani, but at the same time, he's such a unicorn in so many different ways that I really don't think it's necessarily as simple as like, oh, he's now less valuable overall. And I think it's just a matter of the Angels have to see what they've got with new ownership if that is something that is going to happen this offseason. And I think it's supposed to, or it should anyway. I think it's worth taking the offseason to try to see what they can make happen. Am I optimistic about their chances? No, I'm pessimistic about their chances overall. But I think it's at the very least worth seeing what you can do with Ohtani in the fold for the first half. See if you can make it work. And if you can't, you've still got time to move him because, and I think too, the other side of it's going to be he's not going to want to stick around much longer if this keeps going. He's already making the noise about, I want to play in the postseason. I want to be on a good team. You might as well try to put that together before you have to move him. And I think that's the other thing. The Angels don't have to move him right now. There is some time, I think. I just think the odds of them being able to pull that kind of thing off are very low.
That's fair. Anthony Rizzo, where does he play baseball next year, John? And do you think the Yankees are the best spot for him in 2023?
Yeah, I don't really see any reason for him to leave New York unless the Yankees come to him with just a totally non-existent offer or just make it clear that they're not interested in him going forward, which wouldn't really make a whole ton of sense to me. He fits very well in that lineup. He fits very well, obviously, in that ballpark. He's a relatively cheap commitment. He's not someone who's going to be blocking anyone, either short-term or long-term. The Yankees don't really have any top-flight short-term first base prospects. Long-term, obviously, Rizzo is not going to be there for the long term. I think in terms of other teams that could probably use some first base help, just going off like what they produced last year. I mean, if the Angels really are serious and Rizzo is available, that's a guy who would make a lot of sense there, unless they want to give Jared Walsh another spin. I'd be curious if Houston, since they're losing Gurriel and Mancini, what they want to do at first base going forward. I wonder if Rizzo would make sense for them as well. Miami, another team that really got very little production out of first base last year. I know they put Edwin Diaz there at the end of the season because they want to see what they've got. But if they're not feeling confident about that, Rizzo is a guy I think would make a lot of sense there. Although left-handed power in Miami is not a good fit. That ballpark is a terrible place for left-handed hitters. So don't feel super great about that one. The Giants similarly, if Brandon Belt walks, and I think there's a very real chance Belt might follow Bruce Bochy to Texas. But if he walks, Rizzo could be a pretty 1-for-1 replacement there. That'd be nice. So I think there are a lot of options, but I think New York is probably the one that still makes the most sense overall.
I could see it. Most interesting opt-in so far, John, and the most interesting opt-out so far for you?
You'd have to who have been the opt-in so far? Most of what I've seen has been opt-outs.
I have the list. Let me see. So Jimmy Nelson club did not pick up his offer. Mitch Haniger did not get his qualifying offer picked up. AJ Pollock declined his player option.
Pollock is kind of a confusing one to me. I guess he had an option for $13 million and a buyout for $5 million, so he's clearly banking that he can get a deal worth more than $8 million on the open market, which he probably can. But on the other hand, AJ Pollock wasn't very good last year, and he's not someone. I mean, this is a guy who's now he's going to be 35 in the beginning of December. He was a below league average bat last year for the White Sox. He really struggles to hit right-handed pitching. He was great his last 2 years in Los Angeles, but this is not someone I think that most teams would turn to as a full-time outfielder. I think this is someone who at this point probably fills kind of a reserve platoon role. Is that a guy who's going to get a better than $8 million offer on the open market? I don't know. I mean, if you're a White Sox fan, you're probably happy that Pollock is gone. You can actually do something different in right field or try it again for the billionth time. But that one is a little surprising that he wouldn't just take the guaranteed money, because I don't really see him as a guy who's going to be all that popular as a free agent. But who knows? Gene Segura, another one who, I mean, that was a team option where they're pushing him out. I wouldn't be surprised if Segura comes back on a smaller deal, perhaps. But I could also see Philly just deciding that they want to move Bryson Stott to second base, and maybe they'll be in on the shortstop market. So
there are a lot of good ones out there right now.
So I think, you can read into it that way if you'd like to. I think that's not insensible. But obviously it's going to take some time to figure that out.
Your guy
Uh,
Bogart's officially opted out.
yeah, but there's no surprise there. Like Correa, Bogart's opting out. That there's no surprise there.
White
Jerks
Sox
and
pick up Anderson's option. I thought it was kind of
no
interesting
surprises
they
there.
declined Harrison's option.
I think Harrison. I think they had too much Josh Harrison last year. I think the ideal for him would have been as a utility guy. Instead, he had to spend too much time starting. I just don't know that there's much value to him as other than a utility guy. And there are always a million of those guys available on the open market. You might as well see if you can get one who's a little cheaper, maybe a little better defensively, whatever it happens to be. Um, just looking through this list of stuff, mostly Jerks and Profar opting out makes sense. Try to find a multi-year deal somewhere coming off a very good season in San Diego. And he's still only like 29 years old, which is absolutely crazy to
That's
me.
wild. I would never
Yeah,
have guessed that.
Jerks and Profar has been in baseball for like 15 years and has like and is I think younger than Mike Trout.
When did
It's
he
absolutely
debut? What
bonkers.
age? 19, 20?
Yeah, he was a very very young debut whenever it was he made his debut. He's 29 years old. He was born in February of '93, and he
I
made
love that
his
we're like, that is
debut.
just ancient. I'm like, I'm older than this man.
It is very ancient though. That's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
thing. He made his debut in 2010, or sorry, not 2010. He made his debut in 2012 with the Rangers at 19.
Oh, Cashman at the GM meetings. Josh Donaldson is the Yankees' third baseman next year. That's
Yeah,
a
I'm sure.
choice.
We'll see.
That's a choice.
Look, the
You can't run it back with Donaldson. And like, I understand
do
bringing
we
back
not remember
Rizzo
from
and
a
stuff, but
million years ago when Cashin was saying things like Bubba Crosby is our starting center fielder next year?
mm,
It, I'll believe that when opening day rolls around and Josh Donaldson is standing at third base. I do not really see how that happens unless, and I know part of it's like the third base market is not a great one, but I'd also think the Yankees would be probably better off moving Donaldson and trying to see if they can stick one of Peraza or Cabrera or whoever there and just see how that works. I can't imagine there's enough left in Donaldson's bat that they think to give him another year, but yeah, I mean, it's
does
kind of thing like
Volpe
what
start at short to start next year?
I would imagine so if the Yankees don't make a move, but at the same
Mm.
time, I mean, yeah, we'll see. I mean, Cashman does stuff like this, and I think you should not take anything that is said in the beginning of November with regards to the opening day of the 2023 season. You should not put any of that in pen. That is Cashman. That is a Cashman staple. Oh yeah, this guy will definitely be here next year. You take that with a huge grain of salt always when it comes to the Yankees.
Yeah. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at fangraphs.com this week?
So our big thing is we have released our top 50 free agents ranking for this off season. Obviously, Aaron Judge topping that list, but you can find the big four shortstops: Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw. All your favorite free agents are going to be there. We have that with player notes, with contract estimates, with projections from our Steamer projection system for 2023. No predictions on where they're going to end up. That's up for you, the fan, to decide. But definitely check out the top 50. It's one of our big pieces a year. We put a lot of work into it, and it's always a fun time. Dan Szymborski had a quick write-up on Edwin Diaz's deal if you'd like to read more about that. We have a few things coming down the pipe. Mostly the other big thing, obviously, of this offseason, the Hall of Fame ballot. Jay Jaffe will begin whirring up his Hall of Fame machine, the Jaws machine, starting with the announcement from the Hall that this year's committee ballot, part of their old veterans committee, I don't know what they call it now, the Today's Game ballot, which will feature a bunch of guys that I don't think people are tired of talking about. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Kurt Schilling. I know people just want to keep talking about their Hall of Fame candidacies and whether or not they deserve to be inducted. So Jay will have a quick look at that ballot, who's on it, who missed the cut, whether or not we should expect any guys to get voted in. But yeah, we're gonna, now that the offseason is here, we're gonna be breaking it down. We'll obviously have reactions to every signing, every trade, every move. We'll have it, like I said, we already have our top 50 free agents. We'll have all the Hall of Fame stuff. So come on down to Fangraphs, your one-stop shop for all your off-season analysis. Come sign up for a membership, $60 a year, ad-free. Download our new app where you can read our Fangraphs articles on the app. Yeah, fangraphs.com. It's good.
There you go. Jon Tayler, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
All right, sounds good, man.